Mr. Paulison, if I understand your testimony, you seem to be saying that there's nothing you can do because there's no official standard for formaldehyde. Is that what you're telling us?
No, sir, I would not say that at all. I think there are a lot of things that we can do, but I can say that there are no standards to go by, and I hope that we can set those standards with this long-term testing we're going to do. What I am saying is that we have taken the best evidence that we can, the best advice we have so far about airing out trailers, trying to reduce the levels of formaldehyde. We know now that we did not know earlier that that's not going to be sufficient during the summertime, particularly in that Gulf Coast area when the heat is there. You can't open the windows and run the air conditioner at the same time. It's simply not going to work.
Well, Mr. Paulison, for over a year and a half, displaced residents of the Gulf Coast have been telling FEMA that formaldehyde in their trailers have been making them sick. 120,000 families have stayed in these trailers. There are approximately 76,000 trailers in use in Alabama, Louisiana, Mississippi, and Texas. And despite all this time and the obvious importance of this issue, the documents that you provided to our committee indicate that FEMA has only tested one occupied trailer, and that's a trailer in Baxterville, Mississippi. And it belonged to a pregnant woman, Dawn Sistrunk, and her husband, Carl Sistrunk. They had a 4-month-old child, and the trailer was tested only because of their unusual persistence. I want to show you a chart. It'll be on the screen. The left-hand bar of the chart is in green, and that is the guideline set by the National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health, or NIOSH, for 8 hours of exposure in a workplace setting. That's 0.016 parts per million. If an employee, according to NIOSH, is subject to levels of formaldehyde greater than that, NIOSH recommends the employee use a respirator. The next bar is a yellow one, and that's NIOSH's ceiling for 15 minutes of exposure. They recommend that workers only be exposed to formaldehyde at levels as high as 0.1 parts per million for no more than 15 minutes. EPA has identified 0.1 parts per million as a level at which acute health effects can occur. The next two bars are standards set by the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, and if workers are exposed to formaldehyde levels of above 0.5 parts per million, exposure monitoring and medical surveillance is required. The same standards also provide that worker exposure be limited to 0.75 parts per million over an 8-hour period. These are the old standards. These were set when President Bush's father was president. The next bar is an orange bar. It's EPA's acute exposure guideline level, which is designed to guide emergency responders in understanding the risks from a one-time exposure, such as might occur after a chemical spill. The EPA guidelines for formaldehyde states that a one-time exposure to formaldehyde at levels of 0.9 parts per million should not lead to irreversible harm. And then we come to the last bar on the chart, and this bar represents the 1.2 parts per million level of formaldehyde that was monitored in the bedroom of the Sistrunk's trailer on April 5, 2006. This level is 75 times higher than the level that NIOSH recommends that workers not be exposed to. And I have a statement I put in the record from the Sistrunks that they reported all kinds of problems, including headaches, watering eyes, irritated throats. Their doctor told them their problem was due to formaldehyde. Well, do you think that the formaldehyde level that they were exposed to was safe?
Mr. Chair, I'm not an expert in formaldehyde, and I am not going to attempt to even address that. I can tell you that we recognize that we have an issue. We know that we very clearly, the answer to this is to get people out of these mobile homes and out of these travel trailers as quickly as possible. But let me tell you what FEMA said in response to this level of formaldehyde. FEMA and industry experts, this is
Your agency said this, and I'm quoting, FEMA and industry experts have evaluated the small number of cases where odors of formaldehyde have been reported, and we are confident that there's no ongoing risk, end quote. Mr. Paulison, how can you justify that statement that was put out by your agency? You tested only one occupied trailer, you found levels 75 times higher than safe, and then FEMA comes out and tells the public, we are confident there's no ongoing risk. FEMA's statement that there was no ongoing risk was false. A level of 1.2 parts per million is not safe, and this is 75 times higher than what NIOSH would say. There's only one reasonable way to respond to testing results like this, and that's to take the issue seriously. Immediately conduct systematic testing of all these trailers to find out how widespread the problem was, and that's exactly what your field staff recommended. But they said the problem needs to be fixed today, and that FEMA needs a proactive approach. They said there's an immediate need for testing, but you didn't do testing from FEMA. Why?
We did do testing. We tested new trailers that were locked up to see what the level was when we received the trailers, and did, once we ventilated those, did ventilation work to reduce the amount of formaldehyde? And the answer was yes. However, like I said in my statement, we're recognizing that in the summertime that's not going to be reasonable to do that. So we are taking this very seriously. We are doing the testing. We're starting in just a couple weeks to do some short-term testing. We want to take what the Sierra Club did, which, by the way, was a wake-up call for us when we received that report, that we have something more than just an individual isolated case. We recognize that we may have something much larger than isolated cases.
Well, Mr.
So
Paulison,
we're going to expand what the Sierra Club did, do a much more scientific.
Mr. Paulison, I'm going to interrupt you. You had a wake-up call. You must be a very hard sleeper, because that wake-up call was over a year ago. And FEMA did no further testing. After you received this results, your attorneys put out a statement through emails that implied that FEMA is going to own this issue if you do testing. That shows a complete indifference to the welfare of the families living in these FEMA trailers, because no testing was done, and your lawyers said if you do testing, you may start owning the problem. What do you make of that?
The attorneys are hired for a particular reason, and they are there to protect from litigation. However, the department did not stop dealing with the formaldehyde issue regardless of what the attorney said. We were going...
Did you test any other occupied trailers?
We did not test occupied trailers.
So you tested...
We went along with the advice that we received from EPA.
And your lawyers?
And no, sir. And CDC, if I can finish my sentence, please. And CDC, that if we ventilated the trailers, that would reduce the formaldehyde issue. My concern is... Did you test to see whether it did reduce the formaldehyde levels? It did in our testing on the empty trailers. On the empty trailers where the fan was going, where the windows were open, where the air conditioning was running 24 hours a day? What about where people were living? Mr. Chair, we were not formaldehyde experts. We were taking this as it went along, as this thing developed and got larger and larger. We recognize now that we have an issue. We are dealing with it in the best manner we can. The alternative... The EPA told you the following: the 14-day exposure maximum may be 0.03 parts per million, and the one-year level may top out at 0.008 parts per million. The levels we find after testing may well be more than 100 times higher than the base level. So if you're relying on EPA, they were telling you this was a problem as well. I'm telling you, in hindsight, we could have moved faster. I'm telling you now, we recognize we have a problem. We recognize we have an issue. We're not even sure if it's formaldehyde that's causing the problem. That's why I've asked CDC to test for not only formaldehyde. I want them to test for airborne bacteria. I want to test for mold. I want to test for mildew. I want to look at the different trailer manufacturers. If your attorney would sit down, let me finish. We want to test for everything out there. I want to test the different trailer sites. I want to test the different manufacturers. I want to find out very clearly what the issue is and where the problem is and what we can do about it. Again, the answer is to get people out of the travel trailers. We have never had this type of history before. Where
your staff a year and a half ago said you should be testing the occupied trailers. The testing didn't take place. Your lawyer sent an email saying if you test them, you may take ownership of it. You said you didn't follow the advice of your lawyers. You said you followed what EPA had to say. EPA's statement is that the levels that they were seeing were too high for human health. Now, there may be other problems, but you don't think even at this date that the formaldehyde levels were too high and might have endangered public health? Is that your testimony?
No, so what I'm trying to tell you is we simply did not have a grasp of the situation at the time. And as it went on, we are getting a better grasp of the situation. We're advising people what to do. We're telling them there's issues. I'm telling you where we're moving forward with this organization. Now, you can criticize me all what we did or didn't do, but I'm telling you we understand there's an issue. I do care about the residents of these trailers.
Do you think my criticism is unfair?
Pardon?
Do you think my criticism is unfair?
I think it is because we're looking at things in hindsight and not how they were at the time. We are now recognizing, as we have all along, that we do have an issue, and we're going to deal with it. We
Mr.
are
Paulison,
moving.
I know you're telling me what you're going to do, but your own staff said what you should have done a year and a half ago. That's not hindsight. You didn't have the foresight to listen to your own staff, but you did have the wrong judgment to listen to the bad advice of your lawyers. My time has expired, and I'm going to recognize Mr. Davis for his time to question you.